Hi, it's Dwyer. It is August 17th, 2025. GamblersAdvisory.com, a free site. BettingAngle.us, a free site. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, longtime viewers here know that I consider Filip Ergovic to be the heir apparent, right? Just on a talent level. Looking around this league, asking the hard question of, gee, who has the most? Who, if they come in with their A game, can win the biggest matches? Right, folks? I believe Filip Ergovic is that guy, certainly from a betting perspective, because the public doesn't think that highly of him. Right now, I was expecting him to beat Daniel Dubois. I give Dubois credit on the win. I'll just say, if you look at the punches thrown, the right hands landed by Ergovic, that fight was really won by Dubois' chin, right? And it is interesting because Dubois, of course, has had chin problems in other fights, that Kevin Lorena fight. But he had his A game that day. Filip Ergovic did not. Ergovic lost that match. So it might surprise some people, given my high praise of Ergovic. And I understand the world is looking at Atama, the world is looking at Usyk, right? Great. But given my praise for Ergovic, it might surprise some people to know that the bet I recommended to premium subscribers was to take Adeleye. He was mispriced, folks. You were getting him at 6-1. 6-1. Right? One of the best left hooks in any division in boxing. A punch that matches anybody's punch in the heavyweight division. You were getting Adeleye at 6-1. The hedge was an easy one. I told subscribers to hedge the over and to try to do so on an alt line that was lower than the market line, right? Well, just understand, even if you got the market line, the fight went over. So the fight actually paid you, right? When you're getting 6-1 on one side of the play, if you're able to get anything, appreciably above a minus 600 on the over-under, right? And I thought the fight would go some rounds. Then you can profit if either happens, right? So premium subscribers profited on this fight. But let's be upfront here. I don't want people to think that Ergovic is without flaws. He has flaws. First, he has a Jaron Ennis problem, right? While he, hits hard with both hands, while he can take you out with body shots or chopping right hands or uppercuts, while he's 6'6", and it's hard to find his head, while he has a lot of good things going on, he gets hit hard. His defense has leaks, right? Someone with ring coverage, long power, who lands on him. If Efe Ajagba, for example, lands on him, he could have problems. Right here, you just heard me talk about David Adelaye's beautiful left hook. It's really a great punch. And this is a sudden puncher. In other words, his punches are sudden. They don't require a wind-up. He can get off the shot. Right? Just understand he lands that left hook. Look at the 8th round. Right? Ergovic isn't defensively blessed. He doesn't know how to stop some of the heavy artillery from landing on him. right? These days, nor can Jaron Ennis, who used to be defensively blessed. You need to keep an eye on that. Ergovic has another problem. He has scar tissue around his eyes, right? So just understand what that means. He's more susceptible to being cut in fights than most. He's cut in this fight. And the problem with his cuts, when you have scar tissue, is when the skin separates. It's a deep cut. So you see the blood around his eye. That creates more than one problem, right? The first problem is that the judges see it, right? Doctors get called in to look at his cut because his cuts are the kind of cuts that bleed, right? The other problem, of course, is his vision. He, bleeds so much that you get the feeling he can't see some of the punches coming. Maybe that's why he gets hit with Adeleye's big left hook. Right, let me make another point on Ergovic. It needs to be mentioned. Had the same issue in the Moses Atama fight. Right, folks, it's extremely risky. It's extremely risky to throw your dominant hand, particularly early, when your opponent has a full tank of gas, to your opponent's body. I don't care if the shot's there. Understand, if I'm right-handed and I throw my right hand to your body, I'm naked on the right side of my head. Right? Just understand that. So in the Atama fight, Atama's fighting righty Dillian Whyte. If Dillian Whyte knew when Atama was throwing his left, Atama southpaw, to Whyte's body, Whyte could have used that opportunity to throw a counter right hook, would have been with his dominant hand, to the side of Atama's head. Right? Understand, Atama throws his dominant hand, not his offhand. He throws his dominant left. He didn't have heavy artillery left in the tank, right? Because his dominant hand's out front. And when he threw it, he didn't have a hand across. And understand, if you're a guy who's going to have a hand across, guarding against the naked part of your body, you can't wait until you throw your dominant hand, because then your defensive construct might be a tell for your opponent. Well, let me just say here, first round, Ergovic, Adeleye, who's underrated. Ergovic actually starts throwing right hands, Ergovic's right-handed, to Adeleye's body. Right? Just understand, Ergovic's a risk taker. Right? Had Adeleye figured out that Ergovic was going to try to go to his body in the first round with his dominant hand, Adeleye could have queued up that left hook and used it to hit Ergovic on the right side of his head. Right? If I'm Abel Sanchez, I'm reading my fighter the riot act. I'm telling him, look, son, if you're going to go to the guy's body, do so with your left. We can't afford to have your right hand off the table because you're throwing it to the other guy's body. Now, I believe Ergovic gets a bit lackadaisical defensively because he's 6'6". In other words, you notice his defense has some components where he doesn't have any hands up. He's leaning back and he's relying on getting a shoulder in the way. and leaning away from punches. So in the 8th round of the fight, you'll notice Adeleye opens up. And I'm just telling you, Ergovic is not a master at clinching. Ergovic's getting hit with a two-handed assault. Ergovic standing there, getting hit with shots right and left. And it's only because Ergovic fortuitously leans and one of Adeleye's last shots misses him. And Adeleye, of course, doesn't reset his feet to get closer to Ergovic while Ergovic has his hands basically down. That Ergovic's able to continue in that fight. Right? 8th round, great round. Ergovic, of course, knocks Adeleye down early in the round. Right? But just understand, Adeleye had a clear opportunity to drop a defensively lax Ergovic in the latter part of the 8th round. And Adeleye should have, when he realized that Ergovic's hands were down and Ergovic didn't really know how to clinch him. Adeleye's shorter, Adeleye could fight lower. Right? Adeleye should have retooled, leaned, stopped the sequence, had a rhythm break in the sequence, leaned back and thrown his right hand straight down Main Street. Or, doubled up on a left hook. He has the left hook. Have Ergovic think he's going to continue to do a left-right type thing, but instead double up on a left hook and put extra sauce on the second left hook. He could have taken out Ergovic. Just food for thought. Adeleye hits that hard. Let me also make another point, too. I have the fight in my favorites folder. Take a look at it while you can. In the 4th round, you have a gem. Joe Parker's trainer, former Kronk fighter, Andy Lee, joins the telecast. Right now, Andy Lee criticizes both fighters, and it's high-level criticism. Right, with Ergovic, he says that Ergovic gets in position first, then throws his punch. Now, I consider that a strength, right, because it allows Ergovic to do certain things. Ergovic is a master at maintaining distance. You'll notice that. He's a master at accuracy. Look at the CompuBox numbers, folks. The discrepancy is glaring. Not just for this fight, but for the Joe Joyce fight. That's a hallmark, by the way, of Ergovic fights. Ergovic also can throw a chopping right hand where he gets in position, then he throws that right hand from up top. Let me say this too. Ergovic is able to, it's high risk, use his body for defense. In other words, this is the fighter who is thinking about body control, which a lot of fighters don't. But Andy Lee doesn't like it because Andy Lee believes Ergovic could be a harder puncher if he leaned into punches more. Right? If he followed the punches instead of first putting himself in position, then deciding what punches to throw. He criticized Adeleye. The criticism's interesting. His argument is that Adeleye should focus on throwing his left hook, and I'm telling you it's one of the sport's best, as a counter left hook. He feels that Adeleye sometimes is trying to throw it as a lead and is giving up the opportunity to have guys out of position when he throws that left hook. Right? Just understand, he had the perfect opponent to make that complaint against, because Ergovic, like Jaron Ennis, is high risk defensively. Right? You see him and he firmly believes he can just turn and get a shoulder in the way on the left hook. And he's wrong about that against explosive punchers like David Adeleye. Now, let me just say this, and I know people are going to disagree with me, and that's fine, right? I'm just interested in heists. In other words, I just want to take advantage of mispricings, right? I understand that while Ergovic has a punch, again, he knocks down Adeleye at the start of the 8th round, that Ergovic is a guy who's not going to try to take you out early, even though he has several early knockouts against non-elite competition. Right? So Ergovic for me is great to bet on. I don't need to, be on the fighter everyone likes. I just want the fighter who I can bet with, who I personally understand would give any heavyweight, Usyk, Itama, a problem. Let me just say this, though. I get the feeling that a heavyweight with a good jab, and understand this is a deep heavyweight division. This is a deep division. A heavyweight with a good jab, and why a jab? Because Ergovic is a master at spacing. You need the kind of punch where you're still in your defensive construct as you're being offensively aggressive. A fighter with a stiff jab and height to offset Ergovic 6'6" would give him a hard time. So just understand, obviously I'd be concerned if he fought Tyson Fury, who has a mobile jab, right? If Fury still is Tyson Fury, right? Father Time is unrelenting. I'd be worried if he fights Lawrence Okolie. Right? Okolie to me is one of the most dangerous men at heavyweight. Right? The public's not talking about him. Great. Hopefully that means better odds for me if Okolie gets a big fight and I get the opportunity to bet on him. Understand, Lawrence Okolie would be able to deal with the spacing that Ergovic brings to the table, because Okolie would be able to hit Ergovic with jabs from distance. He'd be able to be active from distance. He wouldn't have to get close to Ergovic. Right? But I need for folks to be clear here. I want you to look at the fight. Ergovic gets his eye busted up in the 2nd round. There's some panic on the telecast. They actually tell you that there's the possibility that this fight could be stopped. The cut looks that bad. Right? You see the red around Ergovic's eye. It's a deep cut. It's early in the fight. Right? From that point, 2nd round, to the 8th round, when Filip Hrgovic knocks down David Adeleye, I would argue that there are few at heavyweight who could put on that level of performance. Right? It's height, it's volume, it's accuracy, it's body control. If you bet on him, you were a little concerned by some of the high risks he's taking against the puncher. Right? But just understand, that Filip Hrgovic, 2nd round to the 8th round, when he knocks down Adeleye, 8th round switches. Adeleye then starts roughing him up. But that stretch of Ergovic, I'd take today over Daniel Dubois. Right? If you're in the Ergovic part of the ledger, that's the case for him being the heir apparent. His hands are not as fast as Moses Itama's. Right? Itama is a guy who, as I said, is not Derek Chisora, is not Mike Tyson. He's not trying to smother you in the pocket. Right? Rather, he's a guy who jumps in and out of the pocket. right? Filip Ergovic is a guy who likewise moves in and out of the pocket, but for sustained periods of the fight can stay far away from you and land on you, right? Let me say Hrgovic. Now, this isn't his game. He's actually a slugger, right? Hrgovic is a guy who takes you out. But then he lost to Frank Sanchez, right? Sanchez was moving around the ring. Sanchez even knocked him down. So Hrgovic, who has layers to his game, when he fought Martin Bakole, and you and I know, he beat Bakole. The judges called it a draw. Bakole's lucky. Right? But in that fight, Hrgovic, against a dangerous opponent, unveiled a jab and movement and back foot. Right? If he can pump that jab like Lawrence Okolie, he'd have a shot on Filip Hrgovic. Right? So I need for folks to recognize that right now, the heavyweight division is the deepest I've seen it. Right? We're focused on, a few guys, right? Ajit Kabayel. We're focused on Moses Atama. Of course, we're focused on Usyk. Right? I'm just telling you, there are a bunch of guys representing different styles. Right? You still have sluggers out there. But you also have movers. You heard me mention Frank Sanchez, who wasn't completely healthy when he lost to Ajit Kabayel. Right? Understand, too, I believe Ajit Kabayel has surprised a few people with his body attack. Someone who comes in, particularly a mover like Frank Sanchez, who knows that Ajit Kabayel is going to try to jump in the pocket and hit him to the body, could fight a different fight to make it hard for Kabayel to do that. Let's remember, too, Kabayel hits the canvas against one of my favorite fighters, Zhilei Zhang. Right? Zhang has himself to blame for allowing Kabayel somehow to time body shots in that fight. Let's just say you have jabbers, you have body punchers, you have concussive punchers. Moses Atama is clearly a big puncher. As I sit here, I cannot say that Atama hits harder than Fabio Wardley or David Adeleye or Hrgovic. Right? Let's just speculate for a moment. And I know the public's going to disagree with me, and that's fine. Right? All of you know it's not the first time. If Lawrence Okolie fights not just a Ergovic, but if he fights a Moses Atama, and they've sparred, right? Understand, a jab could prevent a guy who likes to jump in the pocket, back out of the pocket, jump in the pocket, back out of the pocket. A jab could prevent him from doing so. Right? You start to go in the pocket, you start getting hit with a stiff jab. That might limit your options, folks. Right? One of the secrets to Sonny Liston was that here's Liston in the pocket. He's fighting tough guys like Cleveland Williams, right? He's fighting guys who, have big punches. Actually hurt Liston, right? Liston gets a broken rib in one of the Cleveland Williams fights. But Williams didn't have the jab that Sonny Liston had. So in the pocket, Liston could move Cleveland Williams. You understand? Liston had a safe harbor in the pocket. That's what a Lawrence Okolie jab could do. So let me just say, the heavyweight division's competitive. For those doubting Ergovic, Second round to the start of the eighth round. Eighth round, it's a right hand that drops David Adeleye. Right? There's no questionable bump like there was in the Fabio Wardley Adeleye fight. There's no, did the ref call a break? No, 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 no. This is a big man chopping wood. Right? He's landing a variety of shots over several rounds. And he puts the exclamation point at the end of the sentence. At the beginning of the eighth round. Right? So, it's competitive out there, folks. I'll agree, there's some chinks in Ergovic's armor. He shouldn't have gone off as the big favorite that he did. As a side note, nor should Moses Atama in a fight that Atama won by first round knockout. Right? You want to follow guys getting outsized lines because they're betting opportunities. Right? I can love Filip Ergovic. Right? But still be willing to take 6-1 on his opponent as part of the hedge, which is what I recommended to premium subscribers. Right? You can love Moses Atama. Right? Atama's a big talent. I love Moses Atama. You can love Moses Atama. But if you're looking at a betting spread, and his opponent has been in with several guys who have held the heavyweight title, and his opponent has won his fair share of matches, and they're giving you a lot of points, a lot of odds, then even if you think Atama's going to win the fight, if you think Ergovic's going to win the fight, you can collect money on an over-under as a hedge on a bet you place on the opponent. The lines are out of whack in the heavyweight division. Understand, elite fighters have losses, not just Bacoli, but Joe Parker, right? Zhili Zhang. Don't let a loss or two or even three on a fighter's record dissuade you from taking advantage of this era of lopsided odds, right? Adeleye, better than advertised. That's the reality, because he's lost a couple of matches against very difficult opponents, right? Fabio Wardley is a tough puncher, right? Filip Ergovic, in my opinion, is right around the top of the division. I believe the public is going to underestimate him in future fights. Keep an eye on Adeleye. He only has to be right once, right? He let a couple of opportunities pass him by in this fight, right? When Ergovic, and don't get me wrong, Ergovic's reading movement, he has timing. But when Ergovic's throwing his dominant hand to Adelaye's body early in the fight, on, the side of Adelaye's left hook, Adeleye should have been prepared. If it looked like Ergovic was just going to go low, the minute Adeleye got that thought process, he should have been throwing left hooks up top. Let me close with this. I noticed that there are many people now who are saying that Terence Crawford has a real shot on Canelo. Right? I just need for people to remember, when we talk about the best left hooks in boxing, that Canelo has a great left hook. Right? Let me also say this too. Canelo's on his front foot in the Golovkin rematch. Golovkin hits a lot harder than Terence Crawford. Understand that rematch was at 160 or 168. And Canelo, even with an opponent having great power is on his front foot. Abel Sanchez actually had a disagreement with his fighter, Golovkin, on that fight. He wanted Golovkin to continue to be aggressive. Believe it or not, according to Abel Sanchez, Golovkin decided he wanted to box Canelo in that rematch instead of try to outpunch Canelo. Right? The rematch, of course, was Golovkin's first loss as a pro. It's one of the biggest wins of Canelo's career. Don't sleep on Canelo's punching power versus Crawford. Right? Crawford's going to have to move against Victor Postal. A Crawford on the move was able to knock Postal down twice. I'm just saying, since it's Canelo's belts, since you have to beat the champ to take his title, more importantly, if a champion's undisputed, I don't know how I'm even considering the opponent if the opponent doesn't win decisively. Right? The question the Crawford crowd should be asking itself is, what's the path for Crawford to win decisively? Right? His last knockout was at 147, folks. The fight at 154 went the distance. The guy he beat at 154 subsequently lost to Virgil Ortiz. Right? Crawford has not fought at 160. Now he's going to take on a champion at 168. I would argue he doesn't have the punch. Prime Crawford, closer, has the punch at 147. I don't believe he has the punch to drop Canelo. How do you take Canelo's 4 titles at 168 without dropping or staggering Canelo? A guy who stopped a champion at 175 in Kovalev. Right? If Canelo comes in and flashes left hooks like Adeleye should have, if Canelo has the mindset of Crawford, the minute he even hints at throwing a right hand to my body, I'm going to throw my left hook. Right? If Canelo lands on Crawford like Atama landed on Dillian White's head and throws off Crawford's equilibrium, folks, the fight is over. Right? Let's think it through. The Crawford crowd's assuming a boxing match is going to break out. One might not. This might be Canelo on his front foot against a guy who he respects, who he recognizes as a first ballot Hall of Famer, but who he also knows has no experience as a pro at 168. Right? Let's return to the heavyweight division. In the heavyweight division, for gamblers, I need for people to understand that sometimes having a fighter with a loss is the best thing that could happen. Right? The Filip Ergovic loss to Dubois cleared the room of his support. Right? Cleared the room of his support. In the comment section of this YouTube video, and I know I'll get some blowback, and that's good. That's what this site's about. Tell us the heavyweights you feel who could have stood up to the Ergovic from the second round through the knockdown at the start of the 8th round in this Adeleye fight. Give us the heavyweight. Tell us why. I'm talking about current heavyweights. I'm not talking about past heavyweights. Right? I'll concede the Zhili Zhang Ergovic fight was close. But people need to understand, and Zhang certainly would give Ergovic a tough rematch. But I need for people to understand that I consider Zhili Zhang to this day to be one of the best heavyweights in the heavyweight division. Right? He lost. I believe he's another betting opportunity. right? Zhang's going to scare a lot of people away with age, right? He's much older than Ergovic. Ergovic's 33, Zhang's around 40, right? Folks, power's the last to go. Zhang is a southpaw. Zhang has one of the biggest punches in the division. Zhang is accurate. He's accurate, right? I think right now the crowd is misaligned on the talent levels of some of the boxers, right? I believe Ergovic and Zhang belong in the conversation of the best heavyweight, right? Zhang, of course, knocked down Joe Parker twice in a fight he lost, right? Just understand, Joe had to get off the canvas twice to win that fight. Of course, Zhang stopped Deontay Wilder, right? Folks, I believe Wilder would give a lot of fighters problems. Moses Atama on Wilder. Atama's left lines up with Wilder's straight right hand, right? Tell us in the comment section here what Atama would do to box Wilder. I look forward to your comments. Thanks for stopping by.